Welcome to this explainer. As I was going through today's sources, I realized that what happens inside your computer's memory every single day is basically a high-stakes comic book-style rescue mission. We're going to dive right into the hidden mechanics that keep our digital lives running smoothly and figure out exactly what causes them to crash.
Because, let's be honest, we've all been there, right? You open one too many heavy programs, maybe you're streaming a video in the background, and suddenly your ultra-fast device is lagging like it's stuck in molasses. Your fans start spinning up, your cursor stutters, and you are just left staring at a frozen screen. But what is actually happening under the hood when your system hits that absolute wall? Well, let's establish our baseline. Section 1. Inside your fast workspace, the RAM baseline.
Our main hero in the story is RAM, which stands for Random Access Memory. You can think of it as the neon-lit, hyperspeed workspace of your computer. It is your main primary memory. RAM stores all the data, the programs, and the exact instructions that your CPU, the brain of the computer, is actively using right in this very second.
But every hero has a weakness, right? And here is a fascinating one I found about this fast workspace. It is incredibly fragile. RAM is volatile. In computer science, this means that if the power gets cut, or if you simply turn your device off, absolutely everything currently being worked on in that memory is instantly erased. It's really just a temporary staging ground, not a permanent vault.
So it basically boils down to a simple mathematical reality. Having more RAM usually means better performance. Why? Well, because your computer can keep a lot more active data ready for the CPU to access instantly without having to wait around. It's exactly like a physical desk. A bigger desk means you can have more papers open at once without having to constantly file them away in your drawers.
Which brings us to Section 2, the overflow crisis and the virtual lifeline.
So, what happens when you push the system to the absolute limit and that physical RAM workspace completely fills up? This is a classic Cambridge IGCSE style scenario. Imagine your operating system facing a critical crisis because a program desperately needs more memory to run, but the physical RAM capacity is completely maxed out. Without a backup plan here, the whole system would just completely crash.
But enter virtual memory. This is the trusty sidekick to our RAM hero. It's a really clever memory management technique where the operating system essentially borrows a portion of your secondary storage, like your hard disk drive or your SSD, and uses it as extra emergency backup memory when physical RAM just isn't enough. The operating system manages this whole crisis through a pretty ingenious swapping process. First, it looks around and identifies data currently sitting in RAM that isn't actively being used at this exact millisecond. Second, it moves that inactive data out of the RAM and onto the storage disk. Finally, when you click back over to that old tab or program, the OS swaps that data back into RAM while moving something else out to make room. It is a constant, rapid-fire juggling act. It's kind of like a panicked chef frantically moving pots on and off a hot stove just to keep things from boiling over. Now, when you put these two head-to-head, the trade-off is pretty obvious. RAM is blazing fast and it's used directly by the CPU. Virtual memory, on the other hand, is a much slower backup because it has to rely on the physical read and write speeds of your storage disk. I mean, yes, it lets programs run that otherwise totally couldn't, but it absolutely comes at a speed cost. And here is a crucial takeaway, a real aha moment. Even though virtual memory lives on your permanent storage drive, the system still treats it as temporary space. So whether data is currently sitting in your physical RAM or it's been temporarily swapped out to virtual memory, both sets of information are instantly wiped clean the moment the device is powered off. It's all still part of that volatile work cycle.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the danger zone. Beware of disk thrashing.
Relying too heavily on this slower backup actually triggers our main system lagging villain, known as disk thrashing. This is exactly what's happening when your computer starts locking up, the hard drive light refuses to stop blinking, and your cooling fan suddenly sounds like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. You see, disk thrashing happens when the system becomes so overwhelmed with active tasks that your physical RAM gets completely choked. The operating system enters a full-blown panic state, spending all of its processing power and time frantically swapping data back and forth between the disk and RAM. It gets so busy just moving files around to make room, it actually stops executing your tasks. So, ironically, the very system trying to save you ends up bringing your device to a crawling, super frustrating halt.
Let's look at how we fix this in Section 4, long-term vaults, local versus cloud storage.
To resolve our story and avoid losing everything to volatility or disk thrashing, we have to look at where data goes to live permanently. And that brings us to storage. Unlike RAM, storage is your permanent vault. It's just the general term for where a computer keeps your documents, your photos, and your files safe for later use. And today, this vault basically comes in two primary flavors that completely dictate how you save your digital life.
Let's break down these two options. Local storage means saving data on a physical device you actually own, like an internal SSD or maybe a USB stick. It gives you incredibly fast access without needing any internet connection, and you retain direct physical control of your data. Cloud storage, conversely, means you're saving data on remote servers accessed via the internet. This makes it ridiculously easy to access your files from any device anywhere in the world.
But it's fascinating to look at the trade-offs here, because neither system is perfect. Local storage has some pretty severe physical vulnerabilities. If the device itself fails, say you drop that external hard drive or your internal SSD just dies, your data is gone forever unless you've meticulously maintained a backup. Plus, your space is strictly limited by the physical capacity of the drive you bought. On the flip side, leaning entirely on the cloud brings its own set of modern risks. It completely depends on a stable internet connection. If you are offline, you are locked out of your vault. It can also get really expensive if you have massive data needs. And most importantly, it introduces profound security and privacy concerns, simply because your private data is sitting on a remote server controlled by somebody else. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a critical question to consider. In our heavily connected world, if your physical drive crashed today and your cloud provider suffered a massive security breach at the exact same time, how safe is your permanent vault right now? Thanks so much for exploring these incredible systems with me.